What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com for another edition of our Daily Drop podcast series. I'm Jacob Turner. He's Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here to talk some Carolina basketball. Today is, I don't know if people have seen it. I think a lot of people probably have. And some of these, I like to call them way too early projections because we still got a little bit of time, as people know, before we actually get to basketball season. We do have a full football season to play pretty much before that starts as well. But there are a lot of way too early kind of rankings and projections out there currently that don't have North Carolina included in the top 25, which I think is an interesting topic. This is a blue blood program in North Carolina, AJ. This is a program that, from a fan base perspective, is desperately trying to climb back to the top. And this is a program that, as we've talked about in countless podcasts before, when you look over the last 10 years or so, or really going back to the 2017 national title game, has struggled and has not lived up to the very, very high standards that it is set, especially in the last 5 or 6 years in particular. So we wanted to come on here and kind of discuss it because obviously it's always a little intriguing when you see a team like North Carolina, who you kind of expect to always be in the top 25, not included in some of these early projections. And I think we can sit on here and also discuss, well, why is that? So, AJ, when you went and looked at some of these projections and rankings right now, were you at all surprised to not see Carolina included, or were you kind of looking at it and saying, yeah, I kind of see where they're coming from a little bit? What was your kind of take on that?
Let me preface by saying, excuse me, I put no stock in these things.
Yeah, so me either.
I'm not a big preseason, but it's still a conversation piece because they're not in, and because it's North Carolina.
It's not a conversation piece if they're in it, really. It's just kind of like, yeah,
I think
usually are.
I think that we can glean some things from this. Number one, people still pay very close attention to what North Carolina does with its roster building. And most people who make these rankings, the Goodmans of the world, the Rothsteins of the world, know that they didn't go out and get a three, a conventional three. Jaron Stevenson played a lot of three at Alabama, but I wouldn't say he's a conventional three. They don't have that bucket getter that you and I have talked about so much from the three. They have guys that can play. They have guys that can score. But people are sort of questioning, okay, who's the three that's going to be that slasher and scorer, hit the threes, the Cam Johnson type, and who's going to have the ball in their hands to set somebody up to run a set at key situations, because I think most people don't see Kyan Evans as the prototype point guard. So I think that's a big part of it. I also think the other thing to glean from this is there's not a tremendous amount of confidence in Hubert Davis around the country. And people have seen that a lot of guys have shown up that had expectations to do something that they didn't do. There have been holdover players that did not reach expectations based on stuff that came out of the program. Last year with Jalen Washington is a perfect example. You and I had podcasts, David and I talked about it. We said, look, program believes he can really break out. Well, he didn't. He ended up not even starting at the end. The best basketball they played was when Van Allen Lubin was starting in the post and Jay Wash was just coming off the bench, limited role. So I think there's a lot of doubters about Hubert. There's a lot of doubters in how he builds a team from the beginning of practice to the season. It takes a while to make changes. It takes a while to go to Brady Manick. It takes a while to go to the lineup he ended up using when they had the win streak toward the end of the season. So it isn't just Carolina fans who say these things. It's a lot of national people. I think that's a big part of it. The other thing is, when you look at the roster, there's no wow factor. I think Caleb Wilson is intriguing, but a lot of people who have watched him on a regular basis say it's going to take him a while before he's a big scorer at the college level. There are people that aren't going to move many needles with Derek Dixon or Isaiah Dennis. James Brown coming back. Seth Trimble's a good player. People have a lot of respect for him, but is he your go-to type guy? Is he a leader? Can he shoot better from the perimeter? Can he finish around the basket? And then the Zayden High factor. I think the unknown, I think a lack of trust in or lack of respect nationally by some people in Hubert Davis, and the fact that the guys they got from the portal, other than Vasar, there was no real wow stuff nationally. And then if your wow guy is a big man, that's kind of a problem because big men are often only as good as other guys help them be. help them play. So a lot of question marks. We understand the question marks. We have a lot of the same question marks too. So I think them not being in any of these polls reflects everything I just said.
Yeah, and I said it to you off camera, and I generally feel like maybe I think the Carolina fan base narrative would also have shifted a little bit if they were to get a player like this too, and they'd be a little bit more optimistic about it. But I think the national media, for sure, if they would have gone and landed a guy like Andrei Stojakovic, and you kind of got a bucket getter you throw into the current roster, I think Carolina probably is maybe not super highly ranked, but I think they are included in a lot of these top 25s. But we've spent multiple podcasts a couple months ago at this point, probably talking about the fact of Carolina needs to go out and get a bucket getter, and they haven't got it. And the reason they haven't got it was, like we've discussed before, was some of the financial constraints that they kind of found themselves in towards the end of the portal. So
yeah.
I think the problem is with this roster too. I think there's a lot of potential there. There's a lot of pieces that could turn out to be really good parts at North Carolina. But I think the issue and I think what you've just alluded to is there's nobody as of right now that I can really look at on that roster and pencil them in for anything. Because you're only returning Zayden Hyde, James Brown, and Seth Trimble. One guy wasn't even on campus last year. James Brown is a project guy. We've said that from the beginning. So how much he contributes next year, I think, is a firm toss of the coin. And Seth Trimble is a guy who, while there's a lot of things to like about this game and a lot of things to like about his personality and the leader I think he could be on this year's team, there are also limitations to his game. We've seen him kind of take steps forward on offense last year, but it wasn't consistent throughout the season. So you look at the parts they've brought in too, and they're just guys that essentially, in my opinion, for Carolina to have a really good year next year, you're going to need most of those guys to come in at a higher level program, a blue blood like North Carolina, with the expectations and the amount of sheer, I think, frustration from some parts of the fan base around, hey, we need to fix this and fix this soon because this trend of Carolina kind of struggling cannot continue. You're bringing a lot of guys in that have potential and have parts to like, but you can't pencil them into you don't know necessarily what you're going to get out of them next season. You can't pencil these guys in for anything as of right now. And in order, I think, for Carolina to have a really good year, you're going to rely on most of those guys coming in and essentially doing something they haven't done before, which is always a little bit of a risky situation, that it doesn't usually pan out in the way that you want it to. It doesn't mean a couple kids might not come in and do that, but to have 100% hit rate there is extremely unlikely. So I can understand why these way too early rankings are not including Carolina in them, because I just can't sit there and pencil anything in necessarily for what this team is going to be next season. And I also, and Carolina fans can relate to this, like you've said, AJ, it's also understandable why some of the lack of belief around Hubert Davis is there, because when you look at the resume, you'd be a little bit delusional to be like, Hubert Davis is the best coach in the country. I mean, you wouldn't jump to that conclusion. So I understand it, but again, it's also kind of an indicator in a lot of ways of where Carolina basketball is at right now, and is in some ways found itself in the last, 5 or 6 years.
There's not a great track record for players matching or exceeding expectations as individuals under Hubert Davis, and that's part of Hubert's growth as a coach. He's got a trajectory himself because he had not previously been a head coach at this level, only the JV team at Carolina. Without getting into specifics, there are more guys that haven't met expectations than have, and these are expectations set by the program too. Mm-hmm. So it's not guys like you and me saying, well, this guy should be that, and then if he's not, it's the program's fault because we anointed somebody. These are things that come from the program. The program has expectations too. The Jalen Washington one is the most egregious to me because it just didn't pan out. Pete Nance didn't fit. He's a good player, but didn't fit. Cade Tyson didn't do anything what they thought he was going to do, and I think it changed the team. If you have a 6'7" guy that can shoot out there, think about how different things would have been last year, but they didn't have that. So what they have now is they have a team that's got good players, and they've got guys that have proven they can score in college at times. It's not super consistent, but they've proven they can have some significant flare-up games. But now they're going to be asked to do these things consistently, maybe not flare-ups, but, add, a third, 33% to what they've done across the board for all of them. And do so without a true wing, like a true three, and without a true point guard right now. I mean, Kyan Evans could end up being that guy, but he's a good shooter. He's a scorer. He's going to be a scoring-minded lead guard. I don't think that you could really call him a quote-unquote point guard. One of the question marks, and I'm not comparing Carolina to Duke at all, but one of the question marks people had about Duke last season with Sion James at the point was, when they need to get a bucket in a game-ending situation, do they have someone that can facilitate and get them that bucket? Well, the answer was no, because each time that they lost, they just dumped the ball to a 6'10" freshman and said, go to work. And he struggled. They didn't screen for him. They didn't create for him. They didn't use movement to get him in a one-on-one situation. They just said, go make a play. I think Carolina could face something similar because we haven't seen that facilitating on any consistent basis at all from Kyan Evans. We've seen him do a lot of really good things, but we haven't seen that. So if you're looking at a team that doesn't have a traditional three-man and has a point guard who is not a facilitator first, that could lead to some issues. I think there are areas they're going to be better. They're going to be better defensively, I think. They have more people that can shoot threes, and they're going to be better up front. At least they should be. But they might not be as good in the backcourt. They don't have the facilitator, and they don't have that wing that you need, that slasher. And that, I think, is why people don't have them very, very high. This could be a really good team. There are a lot of nice – I individually like the parts. Mm-hmm. It's intriguing when you think about, can Jaren Stevenson coming back home meet his potential? People forget he enrolled a year early. He should really be going into his sophomore year. And without Jaren Stevenson, Alabama doesn't beat Clemson in the Elite Eight a year and a half ago. Jaren Stevenson had a huge game at Texas last year, but then there are a lot of quiet games. And there are games for a 6'10" guy not to get many rebounds, but he can defend. So does he suddenly hit that spark, find that fuse, and his game take off to what people projected? Does Caleb Wilson come in and dominate as a freshman? Is he a big-time one and done? We don't know. A lot of people don't think he's going to be that guy. I don't know because I haven't seen him play in person yet. So I really can't gauge on that. Does Seth Trimble suddenly become a 35% shooter from three and then finish at the rim, which has been something that's frustrated the crap out of Hubert for a couple of years when he says, just dunk it. You can dunk it, smash that thing through in traffic, get the bucket, go to the line, hit a free throw instead of leaving it bouncing around the rim. There are a lot of things that need to occur that haven't yet occurred, as you were pointing out, for this team to be a club that ends up in the top 15 or top 10 and actually have a legitimate chance to be a club that makes a run. Parts are there, I think, for a good team. But, man, there are some glaring holes that until we see otherwise, you can compensate for it, and they could go huge. They could go Stevenson, Wilson, and Vasar, and they're going to force teams to really struggle to have to match up to that. And you got a 6'3" guy in Trimble who might be 6'3", who's a good rebounder from the two, and Evans is 6'3", 6'4". You could have a very long team. You could create a lot of problems that way, but I can understand why they're not super highly thought of. And honestly, you pointed out, you and I were talking off, before we hit record about how we were going to discuss this. You said on top of all this that part of what they're dealing with is the fact that a lot of people thought they shouldn't have gotten in. And when you pound a team for you don't deserve in, suddenly you're layering them with so much negativity. That's the last thing you felt about them. You don't belong in, and Ole Miss is up 20. Mm-hmm. So it's going to affect how people think. So this club's going to have to be much better in many respects, at least have a much better resume to get in next year than this past year, because people are not going to forget that they didn't belong in, according to most people, and they got pounded by an okay Ole Miss team.
Yeah, if they're a firm bubble team next year, AJ, I mean, if I'm a betting man, I'm very, very certain they're not getting in just because of what happened last year and how it ultimately ended up playing out with the Ole Miss loss. And you kind of sitting there like, yeah, I mean, they won the playing game against San Diego State, and that was really impressive. But good Lord, I mean, you get in the first round and just get your doors blown off. It's like a lot of people are going to remember that and say, well, you shouldn't have got in last year. So if you're a bubble team this year, we're not putting you in this year. Like that will play a factor, I think, for sure.
Two of their last three games, they were down 20 plus. And one of them was Duke without Cooper Flagg.
Exactly.
And the other one was Sean Padilla Padula, excuse me. I told you what he said when he walked by the Carolina locker room after the game, right?
Yeah.
Look at all the sad faces. I'm standing right there. I'm like, man, really, dude? Just take your W and go, man.
Yeah, just get out of town, man.
Sean Padula.
Yeah.
But Sean Padula waxed him, and Duke, without Cooper Flagg, had a huge lead. Carolina came roaring back in both games in many respects, but this is a club that routinely dug holes. They were bashed most of the year, and a lot of the criticism was justified. So I completely understand. And by the way, a quick note, since they won the title in 2017, Carolina's been to one Elite Eight. One, that was 2022.
Not very good.
So if they are the team, if they're not a top 25 team, that means they'll go into March, late February on the fence.
And that's not what
to get stuff done. If that's the case, I have a hard time seeing there would be a year 6. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, again, I agree, because I don't think that's something the fan base is going to tolerate much longer. Because I do, and I'm not blaming him. I completely get it. I would sit on that fence too if I was, had a rooting interest in the matter. So I completely understand it. Yeah.
And if they still could add a part.
Yeah.
To the roster. I know that they're still looking at some guys overseas. In fact, that's the main focus right now. And again, you go back to Stojakovic stuff, and I'm not going to try to start this fire or anything like that. A lot of people went after our reporting for that, and we were 100% accurate about, we reported what was in the collective. We didn't report what donors could add to the collective and what they could offer somebody. But if there was a ton of money there's some other guys that have been out there that they didn't offer. Mm-hmm. That they could have spent less money on and gotten that would enhance this team, and they haven't done that. Their focus lately has been on overseas, and part of the problem with overseas kids is I don't even know the specifics of it. It's very difficult to understand, but there's academic visas, there's work visas, there's how much they can get from revenue share if they can get anything from it. So the money factor is a little tricky with guys that are coming from overseas. Plus, sometimes it's not easy to get those guys through admissions. That is something that they have found out as well. So they could add another part. I'm not so sure they will add another part, but even if they do, unless it's a wow guy like a Stojakovic would have been, they're probably not going to move the needle on the national perception of them going into next season. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe being an afterthought is good.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys that aren't Carolina guys yet, so it'll give them time to play games without a huge microscope being on top of them, and that might be a good thing.
Yeah. And again, just to reiterate what you were saying about the financial part, I kind of look at it, what's crazier, the fact that Carolina supposedly has all this money and is just choosing not to spend it. When you look at the current state of the roster and where I think Hubert Davis is in his tenure at North Carolina, I don't think he can necessarily afford to have another bad year. Or is it crazier that Carolina just doesn't have the financial amount of money they need, and they can't go get, you know what I mean?
They had a ton of money and they spent it. They have $700,000 left in the collective, like we said a month ago. They spent it. They spent it retaining a couple of guys. I mean, people be amazed at what High and James Brown are getting. They're getting paid. Everybody that's on scholarships getting paid. They spent money in the portal. A couple million for Vasar. Just under that for Evans.
They spent a lot of money.
1.4, 1.5 range for Stevenson. That adds up over time. It costs money. Mm-hmm. And the donors were willing to help with it with Drake Powell. They were willing to help with Stojakovic. They're just not going to throw money and say, yeah, just spend it however you see fit. They're going to have a say-so with themselves as well. So it's very interesting where they are in that sense right now. And I don't know. If they add somebody, I think they would have to add a dude that's a 3 that can shoot and bring a little experience to the floor. There's a guy or two out there like that in Europe, but I don't think they have the money for one of them. And the other one, that guy's going to get money staying over there. I'm not going to get names right here now because I don't want to get people all fired up about somebody, but it's a task. But they are looking. Their eyes are open, but it's almost June.
Yeah.
So May 23rd, they got Van Allen Lubin last year, and he waffled back and forth for a while. That offer was made 2.5 weeks before that, 3 weeks before that. They haven't offered anybody for a while.
I think that
the contact that people see on a lot of these Facebook pages and stuff like that. I mean, just checking in to see how much a guy might want is contact. And that's all they've done. Yeah, a lot of these guys that people thought chose another school over Carolina, they didn't even get to the point where they would even discuss a possible, joining of the union, uniting together and being a part of the program. So
yeah, I could.
This might be what they are.
Yeah, I mean, I could
move forward.
I could go to a Ferrari dealership and ask the guy how much that Ferrari costs, but I can't afford it. But I still make
contact with the Ferrari.
I make contact with them though, AJ, and that's all that matters in today's world.
So Carly finds out, she's like, "What is Jacob spending all our money on?" Carly will go to the message boards and blast you for not
blast me on there for buying a Ferrari we didn't need, which would I'd be bankrupt after that as well. So yeah, I mean, I get it. I get the rankings, and I think it's going to be a very interesting season coming up, to say the absolute least, and we'll see how it plays out. But I think I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of our Daily Drop. Good to hop back on here. I know you were out of town for a week. I was out of town on vacation for a week. It's been a while since we've done a podcast, but man,
we were in Hawaii while I was in Florida at the same time.
Man, we were living
somehow THI didn't fall into the ocetion.
Yeah, man, we've been living
Brian
it up. Man.
Kevin did a very nice job.
They did. Yeah. Point to the passer on that. They're absolutely fantastic while you were gone, and contributed to you actually being able to, take a few days off.
I went 4 days without opening my laptop,
which is a miracle. And
I hadn't gone more than about 28 or 30 hours in 11 years without opening my laptop.
Yeah. Someone who's worked with you for 6 years now, that is the fact that you shut your laptop down for 4 days is genuinely a miracle. Cause I know how that 99.9% of the time does not happen like that. So yeah, man, and that stuff's important. You got to recharge those batteries, especially the grind of the season going on and everything. So we'll be back.
One of the reasons why I decided to do what I was going to do. And by the way, so people are going to ask, there's some things on the kettle. So we'll just stay with us. And if and when there's a time to make an announcement, I'll make another announcement.
Yeah, I think that's all that really needs to be said at this point in time. So nice way to wrap this one up. Again, I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones. Another edition of our Daily Drop podcast series. Like the video below. Let us know. Get involved in the comments. Do you think Carolina should be a top 25 preseason team right now? Or are you kind of like us and you look at the sum of everything and what the roster looks like and the question marks around it and say, yeah, I think this is probably not a top 25 team right now. We want to hear from you guys. So appreciate you guys watching. As always, like, share, subscribe, notification bell too. See y'all next time. Thanks.